Mark Carney spent the last year telling Canadians he had everything under control, and this week his own people blew the roof off that lie so hard you could hear it from a gravel road in Saskatchewan. 15 of his own Liberal MPs looked their boss dead in the eyes and voted against him on the floor of the House of Commons. 15. Not one rogue backbencher who forgot to check his emails. 15 elected members of his own party said no. And if you think that is just some inside Ottawa squabble that does not matter to regular folks, buddy, you are about to find out why it matters a whole lot. Here's what happened. A private member's bill called Bill C-233 came up for a vote this week. The bill would have required Canadian military export permits to go through the same review process for shipments heading to the United States as they do for shipments going anywhere else in the world. Now, before you tune out thinking this is some foreign policy nerd stuff, let me tell you what this actually means for Canada and why the left-wing media in this country does not want you thinking clearly about it. Canada has a long-standing defense production arrangement with the United States that lets military components and parts move across the border without individual export permits. That agreement is the backbone of the North American defense-industrial relationship. It is why Canadian workers in places like Quebec and Ontario have good-paying manufacturing jobs building parts that go into systems like the F-35 fighter jet program. These are real jobs, real paychecks, real Canadian families. And the Carney government voted to protect those jobs and that relationship by defeating this bill. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand stood up in the House and called the bill irresponsible. She said it would, quote, decimate Canada's defense industry and weaken Canada's role in NATO. That is not spin, folks. That is accurate. The USMCA, our trade relationship with the United States, the defense industrial corridor that employs tens of thousands of Canadians, all of it depends on Canada being a reliable and predictable partner. If you start slapping new permit requirements on every bolt and circuit board that crosses the border into American defense plants, you are not being principled. You are being suicidal. You are handing those contracts to someone else and telling Canadian workers to go find other work. And yet 15 Liberal MPs voted to do exactly that. 15 members of the governing party looked at the Carney government's own argument about protecting Canadian jobs and the Canadian-American relationship and said, nope, we are voting the other way. Now, some folks in the left-wing media are going to frame those 15 as heroes standing on principle. The CBC will probably give them a documentary. But here's the real story. 15 government MPs publicly breaking with their own prime minister in a confidence-adjacent vote is not a sign of a healthy, unified government. It is a sign of a caucus that is starting to crack. And this is not happening in isolation, eh? It is happening at the exact same time that Carney is scrambling to stitch together a majority government through backroom floor-crossing deals that a huge chunk of Canadians are saying they never actually voted for. Think about what is going on here. You had an election. Canadians voted. The Liberals got a minority. Now Carney is pulling MPs from the NDP and from the Conservative benches, one by one, like he is picking players for his street hockey team. And each time he does it, he is essentially overriding the verdict that voters gave him. Pierre Poilievre called it exactly what it is. Carney is using backroom deals to seize a costly majority that voters rejected. Full stop. Laurie Idlout just crossed the floor from the NDP this week. Before that, 3 Conservative MPs crossed over, including Matt Genereux, who apparently got starry-eyed watching Carney's speech at Davos in Switzerland, the annual gathering of globalists who think they know better than the guy driving a half-ton through a January blizzard in Manitoba. Genereux was elected as a Conservative. His voters chose a Conservative. Now he sits as a Liberal. Nobody asked those voters whether they were okay with that swap. A fresh Angus Reid poll out this week showed that only about 1 in 4 Canadians think a floor-crossing MP should be allowed to just stay in their seat and carry on under the new party colors. Most people think you should have to go back and face your voters. But Carney is not interested in going back to voters, because going back to voters means admitting the last election did not give him what he wanted. So you have got a prime minister who is assembling a majority government through side-door maneuvers rather than an actual mandate. And at the same time, 15 of the MPs he already has are publicly defying him in the House. This is what a government starting to lose the plot looks like. These are not the optics of a man fully in command. This is a toque held together with a safety pin, hoping nobody notices the hole. Now look, I want to be straight with you about the substance of the arms bill debate, because this is where the left-wing media gets sneaky. The left is going to tell you this was purely a moral vote about human rights. But let me offer you a different frame. Canada is a NATO ally. Canada has treaty obligations. Canada's defense relationship with the United States is not optional. It is the reason we have been able to underspend on our own military for decades, while still living under the protection of the most powerful armed forces in the world. You cannot simultaneously tell Washington that you want to deepen the trade and security relationship to fight American tariffs on one hand, and then on the other hand, start jamming up the shared defense industrial base with new bureaucratic permit requirements. You cannot ask America to treat you like a partner while unilaterally rewriting the rules of the partnership. The Carney government actually got this one right. Voting down this bill was the right call. The relationship with Washington is too important, especially right now, with USMCA negotiations looming and tariffs still being weaponized. You do not hand your opponent more ammunition when you are already in the middle of a trade fight. But here is the thing that should concern every single conservative voter in this country. The fact that Carney got it right on this particular vote does not mean his government is stable. It does not mean the cracks are not there. It does not mean the floor-crossing circus is anything other than what it is. And it does not mean those 15 liberal dissenters are going to quietly fall back in line the next time something contentious comes up. Poilievre said it, and I will say it again because it deserves to be repeated. Voters gave this government a minority. That verdict meant something. It meant Canadians were not fully sold on the liberal agenda. It meant Parliament was supposed to be a place of real debate and compromise. Instead, Carney is engineering his way to a majority, one defection at a time, and he is trying to lock in that advantage before any of us can really get our heads around what just happened. The 3 by-elections coming up in April in Scarborough Southwest, University Rosedale, and Terrebonne could push the Liberals into majority territory. If those ridings break Carney's way, this country gets a full majority Liberal government that was never actually voted for by a majority of Canadians. The math works out. The democracy does not. And I will tell you what really burns me about all this, folks. The same Liberal Party that spent years screaming about the importance of democratic norms and the will of the people is now engineering its parliamentary majority through the side door while calling it leadership. The same Liberals who used to lecture everybody about transparency are now welcoming MPs in closed-door meetings and letting them quietly switch jerseys. If a conservative government had pulled something like this, CBC would have been running 18-part investigative series by now. But when Carney does it, it is visionary. It is pragmatic. It is strong leadership in uncertain times. That is the double standard Canadians have been living with for years, and that is why this story matters, even if the inside Ottawa crowd wants to make it seem boring. 15 Liberal MPs voted against their own Prime Minister this week. 4 more MPs crossed the floor to boost his numbers. Most Canadians think those floor crossers should have to face the voters they are abandoning. And somehow, through all of this, Carney is being presented in the mainstream press as a steady hand and a strong leader. A steady hand does not have 15 of its own members breaking ranks on a key parliamentary vote. A strong leader does not need to go fishing for MPs in other parties' caucuses to stay in power. A genuine majority mandate comes from an election, not from a Tim Hortons drive-through deal where you convince somebody to switch parties and hope nobody notices until after the by-elections. Canada deserves better than that. You guys know it. And deep down, even those 15 liberal dissenters seem to know it too.